to TST Broadcasting and the State of the Industry channel. This is Shep Altshuler, publisher of TimeSharing Today and president of the Timeshare Board Members Association. Correspondent Jeff Weir joins me in a discussion about the outlook and trends for legacy resorts and timeshare owners in 2017. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hello again, Shep. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this will be good to do another recap and take a look at where things are going in 2017. And why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the issues that you see emerging relative to the whole timeshare industry?
Well, 2017 will really be a continuation of things that started over the last couple of years and picked up momentum in 2016. They're at the big picture level. There's a lot of consolidation going on in the industry among the major developers. There is a lot of competition for companies to get bigger and better inventory, and so many major companies are now focusing on good legacy resorts that have inventory, and they're trying to add them to their travel clubs so that they can offer more options for their members. That's what's happening at the big picture level for the big companies. For the HOAs, the legacy resorts sprinkled all over the country, they are still facing a very turbulent time in 2017 of needing to recycle inventory that has come back into the associations and to launch a resale plus rental program so they can monetize units that are falling by the wayside as some owners drop out. So there's a financial struggle underway already in some resorts and facing others in the very near term that will be very, very critical because many of these resorts are 30 or 40 years old and they're nearing the end of their lifespan and the operating plan that they were born under. Some of them have sunset clauses, some of them do not. But the bottom line is there's going to be a continued shakeout in the legacy resort segment of the timeshare world, where some resorts are able to renovate and refurbish and start resale programs. And unfortunately, there will be some that won't be able to stay competitive, and they'll need to be repurposed into some other kind of a project, but it probably will not be a timeshare.
Yes, it's pretty clear that rapid changes are taking place in the industry. And at TimeSharing Today, we emphasize the need for all stakeholders, including owners, board members, and management, to pay careful attention to those changes. This is especially true of legacy resorts. Owners should be reading their governing documents and the resort's financial statements. They should be proactive by attending owners' meetings, and they should cast their votes when called upon to do so. The owners' associations must have strategic plans laying out the actions to be taken relative to evaluating the resort's viability to remain a timeshare, to communicate details about the conditions at the resort to their owners, and to explore the services of industry experts whenever necessary. As I had mentioned, TimeSharing Today will continue in-depth reporting about industry dynamics, and the Timeshare Board Members Association, TBMA, will be presenting a new agenda at its May meeting in Providence, Rhode Island, that addresses the critical issues legacy resorts must address. It's interesting to note a few things. When TBMA was first being planned, the advisory committee noted that delinquency rates among non-paying owners of 10% or more should serve as a warning signal that resorts may be heading for trouble. Today, we see delinquency rates at some resorts exceeding 25%. While most resorts are in good shape, some have failed and others are winding down and repurposing for other uses. Also, it's interesting that when TBMA was first launched, the industry experts indicated that there were few, if any, bulk buyers looking to acquire legacy resort unit inventory. But today there's been a surge by vacation clubs seeking to acquire that inventory. So from your perspective, what has changed in recent years to make that happen?
Well, the timeshare developer community is still trying to sell, retail intervals for $20,000 or $30,000 a week, something like that. And they're still trying to attract new buyers. They're still upselling to existing owners, and they need more inventory. That is the bottom line. And because of the economic crisis of 2008, a lot of expansion plans among the major timeshare hotel, timeshare brand name companies, those stopped. Money dried up, and so big resorts that were going to add some fancy new resorts in Hawaii and elsewhere, they just stopped dead in their tracks. That forced a bunch of companies to look at alternative ways to grow inventory, and they found a ready supply in the legacy resort field. And again, this is in all parts of the country. And it turned out to be a wiser use of their money to invest in inventory that was already in place than to try to build fancy, really luxurious resorts in Hawaii and other places like that would be enormously expensive to capitalize. So the economics of the 2008 downturn forced the industry to look for other ways to add inventory, and they did. They looked at the legacy resorts, and they're sort of cherry picking. They're going after the ones that have good facilities and fantastic places, and others that have been taken care of properly by their management companies or their HOAs. They're not picking up dogs just for the sake of having a bunch of lousy timeshares. They're focusing on pretty good resorts that are older but are in fantastic areas and can be very attractive to a person in another part of the country that wants to go to that vacation spot.
At the upcoming TBMA meeting, we're going to be analyzing another interesting industry dynamic, active ongoing sales. The majority of legacy resorts are not engaged in active sales programs, but they should be in order to turn over non-revenue generating inventory. They are often located in wonderful destinations and offer an excellent family vacation. They have owners, guests, exchangers, and renters coming to their properties, but are not converting them to owners. At the same time, vacation clubs are having great success selling their programs, and as you pointed out, they are selling at $20,000 or more. What are your thoughts about this discrepancy?
Well, I think you're totally right. There's a wide discrepancy in how HOAs and legacy resorts are managed. Some are managed well, some are managed by third-party companies that know what they're doing. Some are self-managed, and they're just sort of struggling along or doing well or not. But the bottom line is the whole legacy resort management approach has to get more sophisticated and more professional in order to generate new sales from other units that have fallen back into the control and custody of the association. And as we've seen at other TBMA meetings where speakers have addressed this, if you do not have an on-site resale program plus a rental program to deal with your excess inventory, you're basically dooming yourselves to going out of business down the road. But it really requires the vision, and we've seen that at the TBMA meetings. Some board members are actively looking at what do they need to do over the next 5 to 10 years, while others are just sort of bemoaning the fact that they don't have enough money to replace all the beds. So it's a real dichotomy and a wide set of possible actions, but renting and recycling and reselling inventory is a must.
Well, one of the things that we're looking at again at TBMA, and it started about a year or so ago, and it was brought into focus at the meeting in Tucson this past October. What resorts really have to start honing in on is their viability, their sustainability for the future. And some resorts are really taking a careful look at that and taking action to make the right decision about the resort. That if the resort is looks like it's going to be viable for the next 5 years or maybe 10 years, they have sufficient cash flow coming in, they have good reserves, then they can address the issue of active sales and trying to convert a lot of that inventory that they may have on hand into dues-paying owners. And on the other side, we had a couple of case studies in terms of resorts that looked at the realities of the marketplace and are facing the situation that they must repurpose or wind down the resort and repurpose the resort for some other use. And that's coming to bear because we're seeing more resorts that are going through a winding down process. The Plaza Resort Club in Reno, Nevada, going through a winding down process. We see the Forest Glen Inn up in New Hampshire that has gone through a winding down and repurposing of it. And those are what we call positive outcomes because the management and the boards of directors are taking a firm look at it and making the right decision. Now, we also see some chaos happening in the marketplace. A bankruptcy or resort failure, a couple of examples is Harbor Hill up in Provincetown, and also the Apple Valley Resort in Ohio, which is Ohio's only timeshare resort, are now gone for one reason or another. They weren't sustainable. There was no action to do something relative to winding down or repurposing the resort, so it ends up in a trustee situation and liquidation kind of situation. The owners basically are caught in this chaos of not having a viable outcome coming out of their investment in the timeshare. So have you got any sense of those trends as what you see?
Well, you hit it on the head. There's a widespread field of possible issues out there, but sustainability is the number one issue that boards need to understand. And that will then dictate whether they're going to be around in 5 years or be something else. And the stark reality of it is that there are far more legacy resorts than fancy brand name resorts out there. And this natural sort of winding down process is going to start happening probably at a faster rate than it has happened so far, because most of these timeshares have either 30 or 40-year sunset provisions or end of their usage plans. And unless the boards can be very proactive, in some cases there'll be no reason to keep the timeshare going. You mentioned the Plaza Resort Club. They ran into a situation a couple of years ago where they knew they were just going to go broke because they had too many owners dropping out. Bottom line is, if they didn't find an investor group to help sustain them, they just would have gone bankrupt. And that's what they were looking at doing a year ago at this exact time. We've also seen some other legacy resorts where they are being gobbled up by big brand name companies. And in some cases that's good, and in some cases it's contentious. But the bottom line is, as bigger companies want inventory, one way they do it is go after legacy resorts and nice destinations. And as I said, that can be a good thing for companies and for the legacies because they get an infusion of capital. Sometimes they get management help, and they suddenly have the infrastructure to run as an ongoing business. Some legacy resorts that we've talked about in the past have been resisting a takeover from a large brand name company because they wanted to maintain the culture of their timeshare experience. And they'll continue to have pockets of that happening where the possible solution for a legacy resort is partnering with a big company, and yet some HOAs will probably resist that.
Now, one of the things that I sense is that in some of these deals where there's acquisition by a developer, I'm not sure that owners are walking away with money in their pocket. In some cases, they're being incentivized to turn back their timeshares, and maybe in some cases they're being compensated in some way. But we're going to be looking at an interesting case study at TBMA in Providence in May, where a company has gone into a property benevolently, and the name of the property is The Waves in Ocean City, Maryland. And the company, Lemon Juice Capital Partners, the principal managing partner of that, had an interest in timeshares at that resort and worked with the board of directors, got on the board of directors, and working with the owners and working with the board of directors, determined that the resort was no longer viable as a timeshare, and they decided to undertake the process of winding it down and converting those timeshares to wholly owned condos. And that process through Lemon Juice Capital was a successful endeavor. Lemon Juice Capital came in and provided all the funding to work through the legal process, to work through the clearing of the titles, and they sold off the timeshares as wholly owned condos, and the owners walked away with checks in their pockets. So everybody seemed to be happy, and some were concerned in the beginning, but overall this was a really good outcome where they got some value out of the underlying real estate value of the property. And so it is a situation where real property, real estate does have value in the marketplace if it's positioned, and in some cases it's not necessary for owners to just walk away from that initial investment with their tails between their legs. So that's going to be an interesting case study that we'll be taking a careful look at, in the spring. Now let's turn to the consumers. We do know that older timeshare owners have been impacted by the cost of ownership, their inability to travel, their need to have what's been termed an elegant strategy for leaving the obligations or divesting themselves of the obligations they have for ongoing maintenance fees. And at the same time, we do recognize that many of them have been victimized in the marketplace and that they've often turned back timeshares without getting anything in return for that. So what do you see the outlook is for the consumer in 2017?
Well, all of those issues that you just mentioned are related to one overriding issue, which is that there's a poor secondary market for selling original timeshares. And as a result of that market being sort of artificially depressed as a result of actions taken by developers, many people don't have the ability to sell their timeshare even for a nominal sum. And as a result of that factor, when you get a lot of people in their 80s who no longer want to travel or pay the maintenance fees, they might as well just be walking away from a timeshare that gave them many years of positive enjoyment. And in fact, that is happening. That is one of the exit realities out there where people are just dropping out. And that's how legacy resorts reacquire inventory that they really don't want to reacquire. It just falls back into their ownership. There are some major steps being taken by some of the big brand name companies, Wyndham in particular, to develop legitimate exit programs for people that have been longtime members. And Wyndham's program is the only one that's really public. It's called Ovation. And they've taken back something like 20,000 plus timeshares in the last 18 months from owners. And some owners didn't like that because they didn't get paid for their timeshare. But the 20,000 that did turn their fees back were happy to walk away without having any more maintenance fees or creditor phone calls or any negatives. Now, if there was a healthy resale market, people would just be selling their timeshares and happy to get a few $1,000s for selling it. But that is not the way it works in general unless you have a well-known timeshare at a very good destination, and then you probably can sell it for a few $1,000s. But if you're a typical Legacy Week owner at a small resort in Lake Tahoe or Oregon, you may have a timeshare that is worth less on the open market than your maintenance fees. And as a result of that, it becomes hard to sell. And the real unfortunate truth of it is that the availability of timeshares in the market is getting bigger as people stop using their timeshares and try to sell them. But as that pool of supply increases without a commensurate demand increase, it just hurts sales of existing timeshares and makes it a very tricky market for people. Even if they don't want to own it any longer, in some cases they can't find a good way to deal with it. That's what opens the door to fraudulent, scamming companies that seem to be very cunning and adroit at taking advantage of older folks who are desperate to sell or get out of a timeshare. And it seems like every week there's another criminal case brought by some agency against a company that was either a resale company or a transfer company, but what they were really doing is just taking money from timeshare owners in upfront fees and then not providing services. So they were ripping off timeshare owners that just wanted to get out of their timeshares. That has happened with regularity. I think we'll see more of that because the authorities are in some of the key timeshare states are well aware that there are problems because they're getting complaints repeatedly from regular consumers who feel like whatever they were told in their timeshare presentation and subsequently did not match their real experience, so they're disappointed. There are some areas in the country where there literally are groups of attorneys that work with owners and they try to negotiate escape programs for them, which usually entails surrendering their timeshare for nothing. It's rare that we hear of a case where a company paid somebody back any part of their original investment, no matter what the allegations were against the company. But anyway, you have a cottage industry of lawyers, a cottage industry of scamming companies, both of which who have target customers who are just regular consumers who own timeshares and are trying to get rid of them. The negative publicity about these scam activities in particular is putting pressure on major timeshare companies to come up with programs that will provide their owners, at least, with something that's much more responsible in terms of exit. But there are a lot of things going on in the secondary market that have not been addressed adequately for a number of years. They will continue to create negative headlines for the industry. There will continue to be some occasional lawsuits. There will be cases like the Manhattan Club, where in New York, the Attorney General has been investigating the Manhattan Club for potential criminal and civil fraud for 3 years. And during that entire time, there have been many disclosures about activities at the club that infuriate owners. But at the same time, they've had to continue paying maintenance fees, continue hoping they get reservations, and all the while putting all of their hopes that they might get some of their money back if the Attorney General concludes this investigation and some type of settlement or case that would create new money to be redistributed to owners. But these things will continue until the overall issue of how to get the secondary market healthy is addressed. And right now it's being addressed piecemeal, not wholesale, and there's a lot of talk about it, but until we see more action programs, it's going to continue to be a piecemeal kind of approach that will create many more instances of fraud, litigation, attorneys representing owners, and big companies, all this at the same time still focusing all of their efforts on retail sales to new buyers.
Looks like there's ongoing dynamics, but it doesn't look like there's any strong definitive trends that are lining up in favor of the consumer. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think it's fair with one exception. I think the regulatory groups are getting more complaints and they're paying more attention. So, and there's an example in Arizona. There was just a settlement announced 2 weeks ago between the state and Diamond Resorts, where Diamond has to pay effectively $800,000 to the state, and most of that will be used to provide restitution to a certain amount of owners who bought within a certain period of time. A second part of that settlement is a relinquishment program where Diamond will take back timeshares from people who are eligible at no cost to those owners. Those kind of things will happen more often as states that have a lot of timeshare owners hear from them. And in the Arizona case, they said they received hundreds of complaints about Diamond's business practices and sales presentations, and that's what led them to investigate and ultimately work out a settlement with Diamond that was announced right before Christmas. There are other cases where things like the Manhattan Club languish for years because they're complicated legal matters. But there is hope for consumers if they are active. If they are passive, they shouldn't expect much to happen. As we've advised people in the past, if you need to get rid of a timeshare for whatever reason, you need to contact your original resort first and find out what kind of a program they have, if any. You need to check out what your resale value is on some of the secondary market resale sites so you know whether there's any value in it or not. But those are all issues that consumers have to take responsibility for rather than just hope someone sends them a check in the mail.
Yes, it is important for consumers to be alert, to stay informed about issues that are taking place in the timeshare industry, to avoid paying high upfront fees to solicitors, and to find reliable sources that can help them and advise them, such as licensed resale brokers and reputable online advertising companies that do advertise in timesharing today. Well, thank you, Jeff. We appreciate your participating today.
Jeff, it was my pleasure. Talk to you anytime.
And this concludes this program on TST Broadcasting. We can see from today's interview how important it is for owners, board members, and management to be proactive in addressing the key issues to help assure a positive outcome for all stakeholders. Your opinions do count. So email staff@tstoday.com with comments and articles about today's interview. Be sure to watch TST Broadcasting, and until next time, happy timesharing.